At Memory Lane Publishing in Toronto's Markham Street Village, the antiques are comic books: Superman, Batman, Captain Marvel. And the proprietor is George Henderson, or as he's better known, Captain George.
I've been in business 4.5 years, and when I came into the business, the fad, or what you want to call it, was at its peak, but it's been going, I would say, since about 1951. But it was underground then. Now it's above ground. The people aren't embarrassed anymore about admitting that they collect comic books.
What would you classify as an antique comic book? What do the collectors go after?
A legitimate antique comic book is anything dated from 1945 to 1933. It's a legitimate antique, because comic books themselves, as we know it, that sort of a comic book only started in 1933. So therefore, you know, an antique, it doesn't have to be 100 years old. It has to be near the beginning. So 1933 to 1945.
And just how much do they sell for, these antiques? What do collectors pay for them?
Well, take, for instance, the Batman #1, which everybody talks about, everybody wants. I've gotten $250 for it. It's actually going for about $200 now, $200 for Batman #1, which was spring 1940. Superman #1, which was in the spring of 1939. I see low prices of about $125, but I also see where it's going for something like $300. It depends on who's selling it and who's buying it.
One avid collector is George Olszewski.
I collect old comic books because they're rare. They're interesting because they're precursors of the modern day comics that we have. And it's just sort of a collecting instinct. I like to have them. It's very interesting. Also, the artwork in comics is quite exceptional nowadays. I have seen comic art which would compare favorably to engravings by Doré, for example, in his illustrations to the Divine Comedy.
Rare comic books are reaching such value that collectors are beginning to have trouble with thieves. But as George Henderson points out, sometimes it's hard to get anyone to take the theft seriously. Stan Ranton, CBC News.
Faster than a speeding bullet. More powerful than a locomotive. Able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. Look, up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's Superman.
In my imagination, he's still flying around up there, making the world safe for truth, justice in the American way. And I still read him, along with Batman and Justice League and just about anything else that catches my eye. Because that's what comic books do, and have done since the 1930s. They catch the eye with garish color and heroic characters, hard knocks fantasy, and exuberant escapism. They never were just for kids.
Comic books began as reprinted collections of newspaper comic strips in the 1920s, given away as come-ons at movie theaters and department stores. Freebies. Here, kid, keep your yap shut. By the mid-1930s, they were dealing with original material, pulp westerns and tough detective stories, funny stuff and wild adventure yarns. Until 1938, when two guys from Cleveland, Ohio, created a character who would change the face of comics forever. Superman's popularity unleashed a barrage of costumed, superpowered imitators. And from that moment, fortunes only seemed to rise. Suddenly, there were hundreds of titles from crime to superheroes, terror to kid stuff. Nearly 1 billion comics were published in 1949 alone. It was a golden age for sexy art and hard-edged storytelling. And then, the bottom fell out. Parents and doctors protested the sex and violence. A new toy called TV ate away at the fantasy market. And by the mid-1970s, a once thriving industry appeared on the brink of extinction.
What saved comic books?
On the changing face of comics, our critic at large, Greg Moody, examines the forces that nearly destroyed the comic book industry and the forces that revived it.
was the 1950s, a time when everybody liked Ike and a lot of people hated comic books. Comics were in their golden age, wild storytelling, exaggerated, sexy graphics that played off the need for escapism from the Cold War and the bomb. One Dr. Frederick Wortham, however, claimed that they led children down the path to violence and psychosis. Parents, ministers, and teachers were in an uproar. The floodgates of protest opened, and the music stopped.
It almost capsized the industry. They started, a lot of companies went completely out of business, and the most creative company, EC, was down to their final title, which is Mad Magazine. And everything else that was coming out was just purely homogenized. It pretty much killed the industry for 20 years.
What saved the Cape Crusaders, what saved the comic book industry as a whole were these specialty shops, stores devoted to the art, adventure, and collectability of comic books. 5 years ago, there were only 100 such stores. Today, there are more than 4,000 nationwide.
With the advent of shops like mine, the big companies, Marvel and DC in particular, saw that it was possible to put out a product that older people would be interested in a more adult way.
Another factor was the growth of the independents, small publishers who grew out of the underground comics industry of the 1960s to challenge the major companies with titles such as ElfQuest and American Flag. Unusual titles with harder stories and art that proved to DC and Marvel that comic books weren't just for kids anymore.
They forced the two big comic companies, Marvel and DC, to realize that there is an adult audience out there. Since most of the independents aren't available to kids, they're not available at 7-Elevens or stuff, only through specialty stores like this one.
It was, however, a long road back. Just over 100 titles were published by the three major companies in the mid-1970s. By 1985, there were 190 titles. This year, some 300 comic titles are expected to be turned out, with a combined circulation of 150 million issues, generating $300 million in revenue.
Today, the comic book industry is robust, and the superheroes of the late 30s are experiencing a rebirth. More about them, including the granddaddy of them all, tomorrow.
You're watching Sleepcore. Pleasant dreams.
Obviously, comics are a medium like any other medium, a very great storytelling medium. And because they started being for children, I think a lot of adults thought this is the only thing they could be.
There's an evolution occurring in comics, which many years down the line, comics will have the same stature in our culture that novels do now.
The quality is incredible and much better. People like Frank Miller, who did Daredevil and the new Batman, the artwork and particularly the layout and the plotting has improved incredibly.
Everyone, as they're leading their regular life, they have to have some kind of fantasy in it. You need a dream.
Well, it's escapism, isn't it? It's probably been used 100 times before today, the word escapism. You know, I definitely need that more than anything else, and that's what I'll get out of it.
I'd like to think that what comics can do is to provide material for a post-literate generation that still has all of the substance, all of the density and power and value of literature.
Ten years ago, Judge Dredd was launched in a new British comic called 2000 AD. Dishing out instant justice with ruthless severity, he became the cult anti-hero of teenagers who have since grown up but stayed loyal. Now selling over 100,000 copies a week, 2000 AD has been joined by a new breed of mature comics which deal with issues like unemployment, urban decay, and nuclear war. But vigilantes and anti-heroes like Judge Dredd operate in a crude world of good and bad, black and white, right and wrong. Can comics cope with serious issues? Can they prepare their readers for the complexities of real life? Or are they just escapist fantasies of no consequence? Tonight, Signals travels from the Orkneys to Japan, as well as the amusement arcades of London, to look at the new generation of comics, graphic novels, and computer games, and to see what impact their worldview might have on our lives.
Growing up in Hoy, on the island of Hoy, which is really, you're talking about a lot of beach, you know, around an island. Everything that people got from there that they didn't have to pay for probably came out of the beach. Their food came out of the beach. The timbers that they put on the roofs of their houses came out of the beach. And for somebody like me, the comics as well would wash ashore from the battleships in the Scapa Flow, you see. Freebie in the ebb tide, I think I referred to it once. And they were always missing their covers. You never tell what the name of the comic was. And usually you couldn't tell what the end of the story was. So again, I would probably have to sit there and sort of draw out my own finish to it.
Jim Bakey is a leading comic strip artist living and working in his native Orkney, drawing inspiration from the environment which surrounds him. His fascination with comics has stayed with him since childhood.
The business of pictures and words together is so powerful to me, you know? And there was a time when I felt it was fading out, you know, not fading out in me, but fading out as a universally accepted means of communication. And I think that what's happened today is that the big cycle has come round, and suddenly people are interested in having the comic strip again as a means of communication.
More and more comics are coming out with actual kind of serious statements, and it's been taken, I think it's been taken seriously.
The interesting thing about it is where literature crosses cinema. You get the both. You get like the dynamism of cinema, and then you get a good read at the same thing.
A lot of writers have started writing good stories as comics.
Knock the doors, please.
Most people perceive comics simply as entertainment for children, which has always been a source of great frustration for many of the writers and artists.
Electro, Watchman, Shadow, you name it, they're all in there. 50p jobby.
In the past, mainstream comics have failed to deal with adult subjects, but this is changing, a revolution being led by the writers and artists themselves.
420, please.
More mature themes have brought more mature readers. Comics, in every sense, are growing up.
Oh, I better sign it, didn't I?
There you go. How long have you been drawing comics?
15 years.
15 years.
Twice as long as you've been alive. All of those sort of fantasies that people used to have about what I would do if I was doing comics, now those people are doing them. And they're getting to stretch, and the market is such that they can stretch, and they are being encouraged to do things that perhaps as little as 15 years ago they wouldn't have been.
Writer and illustrator John Byrne has used the maturing of comics as an opportunity to update that classic hero, Superman.
In the 2.5 years I was working on Superman, basically I took everything that was there and just put a slight spin on it. The idea was to say the modern audience wants certain other things from the characters. They don't want their characters quite so perfect, quite so squeaky clean.
But it was another comic book hero, Batman, guardian of law and order in Gotham City, who was to make the revolutionary breakthrough. In the spring of 1986, comic fans were thrilled and amazed by the publication of Frank Miller's Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, a 200-page epic that elevated the comic into a graphic novel.
Batman isn't a silly character anymore. Like, he's dark and broody and dangerous.
It was not just the scale of the piece that was so innovative and challenging. Miller had taken Bruce Wayne, alias Batman, and completely redefined the character by allowing him to age. What emerged was a man nearly 50 years old, cynical and bitter, who chose to impose his own brand of justice on what he saw to be a corrupt and decadent society. The response from the fans was immediate. They loved it. Miller had paved the way for experimentation in mainstream comics.
It's just built up over the years with the advent of more adult comics has brought it into the fore, where people that were buying them when they were kids are coming back into it now. They're seeing them, and the more adult stuff like Frank Miller's Dark Knight, Elektra, Alan Moore's Watchman and Swamp Thing.
Less than a year after the release of Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, came another pioneering work, Watchman, by writer Alan Moore and artist Dave Gibbons. Once again, the superhero convention was turned on its head. In Watchmen, set in America in 1985, superheroes have been outlawed.
We deliberately set out to do a piece that was as complex, as sophisticated, and as multi-layered as the best contemporary mainstream fiction. That's not saying that it's necessarily any good, but it sure as hell is complicated.
Watchmen chronicles the fall of the superheroes as, one after another, they are mysteriously killed. In parallel action, flashback, and flash forward, the reader is presented with a web of visual devices and counterpoints, including a second comic story within Watchmen.
The artwork that I did on Watchmen was done in a specific way for a specific purpose, because Watchmen was a very, very involved story, calling for lots of detail, lots of specific events shown in a very specific way. So therefore I adopted a very clear way of breaking the page down so that the reader didn't have to battle both with a complex layout and a complex picture structure as well. And for that reason I divided the pages into a 3x3 grid, which I think also has the effect of a proscenium arch in a theatre. It stays the same size and you don't notice it, and I think it also pulls you into the picture and into the story more.
Since Watchmen, Moore has been acknowledged as one of the finest writers working in comics today.
You start off doing a book like Watchmen, for example, aiming it at a 15-year-old comic fan. Halfway through the run, you suddenly find that it's getting literary reviews in prestigious literary magazines, and you find yourself in the main highways and byways of mainstream fiction, dressed with your underwear over your trousers and wearing a red cape. It can be quite a disorienting experience, as well as quite an embarrassing one. I think that now we've got the public excited, we've obviously got a duty to keep them excited, to keep pushing the medium forward.
You're watching Sleepcore, media for insomnia.
Is a popular hobby and, surprisingly enough, one of the most expensive. Last week, 9 Marvel comics, including one from 1939, sold for $32,000 US. That deal was arranged by Jerry Ross of Montreal, who owns the second largest comic book dealership in the world. Jerry Ross is also an avid collector of vintage comic books.
Joining me now from the 1 Million Comic Store in Montreal is the owner, Jerry Ross. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
How many comic books you got in that store?
Well, in the store we only have about 150,000, but in our warehouse we have 1.8 million, actually 1,826,365 as our most recent inventory.
Did you count them?
Not personally, thank God.
Now, how long did it take to collect that many?
About 19 years. You know, buying out stores to go out of business, other things like that. But it's not so much the number you have, it's the number of good ones you have that's important.
How many good ones you got?
Oh, I'd say about $250,000 worth of really key comics, such as the ones I sold for $35,000 US. And, you know, you got to constantly buy them. In other words, you've got to constantly spend the money. So I could spend up to $100,000 at any given time for good material from the 1940s, even from the 1960s.
Jerry, what makes a comic book worth $35,000 US?
Well, you know, the thing that makes a comic book really worth the money is if a person feels it's worth it. But these copies were the Larson copies. There are two key collections that exist in the world. There's the Mile High collection from Denver, Colorado, otherwise known as the Edgar Church collection. These were 22,000 perfect books that were found in the middle 70s. And then there's the Larson collection from a person named Larson who came out of the Midwest also around 1975. There's far less of the Larson books.
But beyond the individual's own preference for a particular character or something, I mean, when you see a book, what do you look for to say this is valuable?
Well, it's not a character. I mean, the Larson copies have the name Larson written on them. And they're the first 7 Marvel comics that were ever published in 1939. These comics are in absolutely perfect condition. They're, again, as best as you can get after 50 years. The pages are pure white. The paper is glossy. It's very, very difficult to find something like that. Just normal aging process would usually turn a book brown by that time. Because of that, that's what makes it worth $35,000. The price guide value on them was very close to that. In other words, the catalog value was close to $35,000 US, or about 50,000 Canadian.
Now, how much would that comic book have sold for originally?
10 cents. Everybody likes asking that question, I guess. 10 cents.
It's quite a markup, isn't it?
Well, you know, you got to make a little profit.
Oh, if you'd only held on, you know, the thing that always kills me about this is if we had only held on to some of the comic books when we were kids and put them in, you know, sealed plastic or something.
Yeah.
You and I wouldn't be talking here now. We'd be lying on a beach in the Bahamas.
No, you're quite right. You know, if I had $1 for every person who said that to me, I wouldn't need to run a comic book store. I'd have a large bank account now. Everybody, I think, who's over 50 or even over 40, their mother threw their comics away. In fact, one guy in Connecticut has a store that's called My Mother Threw Mine Away.
All right, you got some valuable stuff in front of you. Show us what you got.
All right, well, the first comic we have is an Action Comics #7. Now, this is the second ever cover with Superman on it. It's dated, as you can see, December 1938, and it's really quite rare. Action Comics #7 in this condition is scarce. In other words, scarce meaning there's less than probably 10 or 15 copies in the world in this condition. And as such, it would command a price of over $5,000, probably. The next comic we have is Superman #1. Now, there's an unreported sale of a Superman #1 for $40,000 US last year. It was possible this was paid out over a period of time, so it wasn't $40,000 cash all at one time as it was in our deal here. I mean, $35,000 cash.
Jerry, is forgery a problem?
Pardon?
Is forgery a problem?
No, there's never really been a reported case of forgery of these type of comics. The paper that it was printed on would be very hard to forge now. Also, the original plates have long been destroyed.
Okay, what should somebody collect now? What would you advise? If you got something hanging around the house, what do you put in a plastic bag?
Right, it depends. You don't want to put it in plastic because plastic will interact with the paper and release acids which cause browning. We have special type of stuff to put it in called Mylar.
All right,
it looks like plastic.
Okay, what should you save now?
But basically, what I would do is, it depends on your budget again, but if you have a couple $1,000s that you want to see increase at a rate of 30 to 50% a year, you buy comics from the 1930s to the 1940s, what we call Golden Age. Comics similar to the ones I have here, like the Superman one and the Action Comics #7. And you just keep it for 2 or 3 years, and you're pretty sure to make a profit.
Are there any comics being released now that are worth saving, like brand new ones that in 30 years may be worth something?
Right. No, not even. There's comics that are released now. This is a whole new phenomena that, because of their supply and demand, shoot up in price rapidly. And within a period of months can sometimes be worth, say, from a cover price of $1 or $2 to a cover price of $40.
Okay, which one?
Oh, I could give you lots of titles. Dark Knight #1, which has Batman in it, for example, just came out 6 months ago. It's selling for $30 now.
Yeah. All right, I'm going home to check the attic.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Jerry.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Locating coordinates, Springfield Mall, another universe. Beaming down Earth creatures now.
You made it. Transported into the most exciting store ever created. Another universe. A state-of-the-art concept in the sale of animation, cards, comic books, games, science fiction, toys, and much more. Transport yourself into the coolest store in the galaxy, another universe.
Join us at our new location in Georgetown, now open. Silver Cactus Comics Megastore, 560 North Nellis is your one-stop location for today's hottest comic book titles and back issues. Silver Cactus has awesome t-shirts, the latest role-playing games, a great video arcade, thousands of trading cards including those hard-to-find special cards, and high-end collectibles. Silver Cactus is also Magic headquarters for Las Vegas and has the largest selection of models and statues in town, plus the latest in Star Wars collectibles.
And remember, you haven't been to a comic book store
until your business builds with Cactus.
Observers say it could be the next Superman or Spider-Man comic. Fans gathered to snap up the first editions. More than 100 people lined up for hours outside a Hollywood, California comic book store to buy a signed copy of Youngblood, a new series created by 23-year-old artist Rob Liefeld.
The last one that I did for Marvel, yeah, there was a lot of hoopla about that book, but this is taking me by surprise. But it's nice. It's always nice.
I do save all first issues of anything I can get my hands on.
My friend's mother's bosses want us to get it signed for their children, so we're getting paid to come to wait here for 7 hours or so.
I'm not really much into comics as far as saving them up, but I guess this is the first issue and it'll be worth it.
Store owner Bill Leibowitz doesn't like to speculate, but feels Youngblood has all the makings of a collector's item.
This is a good comic book. It's a hot comic. It seems to have sold out at the distributor level, and they're going for second printing. That usually means that the first printings will be limited and valuable, and so people will want those in the future.
The first 1,000 buyers will get a certificate verifying the comic's original printing, potentially increasing the value.
Hopefully, by the time I retire, I'll liquidate everything and retire comfortably.
Store owners say if first-day demand for Youngblood is any indication of future interest, the value of the comic could double within the first week.
Standing in line for 8 hours.
This may look like any other Hollywood premiere, but this one is unusual even by Hollywood standards.
Did you wait a long time?
That's because it's not for a singer or actor, it's for a cartoonist, Rob Liefeld, the creator of the hippest new comic book, Youngblood. Earlier today at his Fullerton studios, Liefeld said his crime-fighting characters are also socially aware.
It's about a group of government super operatives or whatever, super agents that are kind of manufactured by the government as an answer to nuclear weapons. And as a result of this, they become instant celebrities. They become media darlings like overnight. The Youngblood team has a PR team. They have wardrobe people, speech writers. You know, they have an image to upkeep.
Liefeld says he was inspired by Superman comics and MTV. In the comic book industry, he has become a media sensation. 600,000 advanced copies of the monthly comic book have been ordered. People waited in line for hours for an autographed copy.
Oh, I think it's wonderful. I'm going to let all my family know about it.
He's fresh, just real fresh, you know. He's not stereotypic.
What is it about this comic book that's so cool?
Well, probably the characters and that it's new.
Liefeld says his characters are media savvy, and it's quite clear he is too. His sister is currently handling business deals for toys, games, and clothing based on the characters, and Rob is currently on TV.
This is the Spike Man.
Liefeld says he did this commercial with Spike Lee to upgrade the image of comics. And just as he calls his characters the next generation of heroes, it's clear his fans think he's the next generation of cartoonists. In Los Angeles, Michelle Holden, Fox 11 News.
Welcome to Wizard World Chicago 98. Have fun.
Okay, we are here at the Wizard World Chicago Con. This is the second annual version of Wizard running it. Now, Martha Donato, you've run the show 2 years in a row. What kind of numbers and attendance did we expect to see here?
Well, last year we had over 26,000 people in attendance. This year we expect that we've gone well over 30,000, although the numbers haven't all come in yet since Sunday hasn't even opened.
It seems like there's a lot of things going on, and it seems like it's more than just comic books this year. Can you tell me a little bit about what the fans saw when they came here?
Well, the fans saw their favorites, Marvel and DC, Todd McFarlane, Top Cow, but they also saw things like Electronic Arts here. They saw Genco Jeans, which is a new addition for us. There was a lot of excitement on the floor and a lot of new exhibitors.
What kind of things did the fans that came to the con see?
There were so many guests and so many professionals that the fans could visit and meet and see for the first time, get a lot of autographs. We had everybody from Stan Lee to Todd McFarlane. Stan created Spider-Man, Todd created Spawn. We had a lot of sci-fi guests like Claudia Christian and Walter Koenig from Babylon 5. We had a couple of people that played the Star Wars characters, the men behind the mask, as well as the very popular comic book artists like Michael Turner, Mark Silvestri, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld. It's really been a really star-studded event.
But what's the mood here like?
Well, you know, last year was the first time I'd been to a Wizard show. You guys had taken over the show, and it was amazing. I thought it was the best run show I've ever been to, and I think you guys have set it for yourselves a new benchmark for the industry and how to run a comics convention.
It's a really good show, and the people are really nice. I've just had a lot of good times here.
The Wizard folks know how to put on a party.
Yeah.
You know, this is one of the best conventions I've ever been to in my entire career. I've been doing this business 18 years.
Too long.
I've been in this business, and this is one of the best conventions I've ever attended, big or small.
Yo, this has been such a tremendous turnout for Marvel. What are the fans saying when they come and see your giant booth?
Well, this has been the best convention we've ever had, and I think I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The Wizard people have just been fantastic.
What do you think of the con?
I love it. It's huge, absolutely huge. People are friendly. We've got a consistent line queuing up for signatures and little sketches and things, and couldn't be happier. Couldn't ask for more, really.
We have got the best fans in the whole world.
Joe, what about you? What do you think of the con? How's it treating you?
Dude, it's been rocking. It's just absolutely amazing how many people are here. I mean, look at all the people here. Look at all the people here. Right?
Thank you guys for putting on a great show and getting a whole new crowd in here. We love you. Mwah.
It's been an amazing con. You know, I mean, what you guys sell out? You guys like you're out of program books. We're out of posters. You're out of Wizard posters. I mean.
We're really excited about this year's Wizard World. It's definitely the best Chicago convention we've ever been to. We've just been so busy that we ran out of some of this stuff to give away. We're sorry, folks. We'll bring more next year.
I've never had a convention like this before, and Marvel has enjoyed this to no end. I think it just demonstrates the power of the two companies, and I'm proud of Garib, and I'm proud of the guys at Marvel, and I love this industry.
So what about the con? How's the con treating you?
It's just a great time. It's a great atmosphere. It's so much of a warmer, friendlier atmosphere, and it's really good when you know the people who run the shows, and it's more of a personal thing. This show is a Wizard con, so it's Wizards, the trade magazine, so it's just going to put that extra thing into it. It's not, you know, just a money-making thing. It's just it's really almost like a summit for the whole industry because it's the first big con of the year, and it's great. Everybody loves it.
Cheryl, it looks like there's a lot of things going on here at the Marvel booth. What are we doing here?
Oh, we're meeting all of our fans. This has been a wonderful show for us. We're really excited. We didn't have a booth here last year. We were here physically last year, but we're happy to have a booth here and a presence here, and we think this is turning into a very important show. We'll see you next year.
What could fans who come back next year expect to see?
Well, next year is going to be a big year for Star Wars, so we definitely plan on doing something big with that. Also, we plan on bringing a lot of superstar guests in as well, and really trying to expand even more into the sci-fi, toy, comic book, and just a couple more areas. The manga, the Japanese animation, because fans are not just fans of comics or toys, they're fans of everything. They're fans of movies and TV and music. Well, here's a chance where they can come all under one roof and really get a sense of the whole entertainment business, and we'll see you next year.